Time keeps on slipping into the future. And
oh man, I hate this episode. This is like the worst episode of Futurama. And now that everyone's left the video, we can begin.
They probably left the series when I was shitting on Friarish some episodes ago. I'm just going to assume. No, contrary to what you were saying, just one of the finest moments of the four seasons.
Yeah, easily.
We did claim in an earlier episode of our retrospective, we claimed that this was the most sci-fi of the 4 episodes. It might very well be.
Oh, yeah, especially off the top of my head that time. And come to think of it, up to all the ones we've watched so far, yeah, probably still is.
This is like Parasite's Lost, maybe.
Yeah, Parasite's Lost feels more like an homage to sci-fi, though. Like, to other sci-fi ideas, like, Fantastic Voyage or
Algernon, yeah.
Yeah, Algernon. Whereas this feels more like an original idea.
Yeah, maybe there's some novel or short story where it borrows from, but I can't think
in the case of sci-fi, that's everything.
Yeah.
Like, every idea.
But I can't think of a Star Trek episode that this borrows from. I don't think.
Nah, maybe just like its framework, but not the ideas themselves. No, like its framework as a television show.
Yeah. But no, like it is just one of like a brilliant little premise in terms of it being a sci-fi concept and there being a threat for the characters to confront. But not only that, it's a premise which lends itself to brilliant humor.
Yeah,
it's such a smart premise as a sci-fi device, but also as a catalyst for humor.
And also,
what
I was
great
thinking
writers.
as a television writing device as well.
Yes.
Because like it was like a non-convoluted or like a plot relevant way to cycle through humor so quickly. In the way that, especially around this time, like critics of Family Guy would have had, how it just jumps from like non sequitur to non sequitur to non sequitur.
Yeah.
This sort of has that frantic pacing to it. But they're not non sequiturs. They all tie into what you've already seen in a very funky way, but also expand. But they can also be non sequitur jokes, like the infamous one with the kids, who because it's sort of become focalized at certain points to go further in time.
Well, actually, we have to pay for their retirement. I demand the money.
Yeah, it skips over their whole life outside.
Winner of 4 Grammys, found dead.
Yeah, that's another great gag as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, the sort of the layer of humor, its timing, and its it's sort of been like a lot of things seem to have derived from this episode, at least as far as like shows like Rick and Morty could just claim this episode as like ripping off essentially.
Yeah. This one, but the Futurama as a whole, but this one in particular,
especially with gags like the one you just mentioned of the pop singer that's meant to be the Britney Spears equivalent, and it skips over like a year or a couple years.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a whole arc, 5 minutes of fame,
15 months of fame. Yeah. But and also managing to tie all of that in, and with its. And the premise of the episode, the sort of genre premise of the episode, tying into this in particular, the emotional subplot, the continuation of the sort of romance arc of Fry and Leela, the way it manages to tie that in is extraordinary. Certainly one of the best episodes to explore their very revered relationship.
No, that's true, and it's not the focus of the episode. It comes in like 3/4 of the way into like heighten the tension as well, so it's really effective that way. Yeah, and a great way to sort of conclude the episode.
One of the best endings in the history of this show.
Yeah,
and also,
for sure.
I quite like, because it is played for laughs mainly, but I like how they use it to tie in the idea of the character's disappointment at like moments, which because this really emphasizes the idea, because all time is lost time when you think about it, but this episode really hones in on that idea of lost time to the point where like it's not even remembered, but it's happened and its consequences have been have been felt, but then just
it's like unconscious
ripped from the continuum entirely,
Yeah,
and it's just and no, it's a really beautiful premise, and but so the way it ties the idea of disappointment in with Bender's as well, like, you know, him wanting to be sort of this great globetrotter athlete with Bubblegum Tate and the gang. But, you know, he doesn't have the soul, you know, because he's a robot. He didn't have an imagination either, and that led to controversy some years later. But, no, I just like... I like that subplot just so you can have Bender sort of relating to Fry there. Because normally, like, Bender's doesn't... I don't know if Bender normally... Like, Taek at the end of... I think it's, Parasite's Lost, when he's trying to console Fry after, like, him and Leela's night there doesn't really work out. And he sort of says something or other, but it's almost like it's just Bender sort of like miming what roommates do on a sitcom, like for the point where like he's wearing like pajama pants for some reason in that Parasite's Lost ending. But it's almost like, and partly because it's the tone of voice, like it feels like Bender is genuinely sympathizing there.
Sure.
You know, having sort of a human moment, being one more step to having a soul, and therefore being, you know, prospective globetrotter, maybe, I don't know. But then, you know, then whistling the theme as Bender walks away, and then that coming back in as non-diegetic music, you know, on the soundtrack, meaning for Fry witnessing the black hole having just destroyed the message that he sent to Leela, which changed her mind about him in that lost blip of time. And it's a... And just so that for those few seconds, knowing that Fry's got to, like, you know, be keeping that to himself forever, having enough respect and for Leela's dignity that he's, you know, just gonna leave that be. He doesn't want to have to, like, you know, influence her otherwise, you know.
Yeah.
She had to see it for herself. Otherwise, she doesn't have to or need to.
Yeah, he has to forever hold his peace.
Yeah.
It's a sort of cathartic ending, but, like, sad as well. Very well done.
Yeah, one of the best scripts on the show, and on any television show, really.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh man, I can't. It's so well done. I'm just beyond impressed by it, actually, and funny. Just all the gags. Oh, and I gotta praise. Well, firstly, it's a brilliant professor. There weren't enough brilliant professor episodes, and this is something I gotta praise for the newer show, the season 6 onward for, is having more professor episodes, and some of them actually being quite good.
There are quite a few
like
more.
Tip of the Zoidberg, or the one where it was him, Bender, and Fry going through the future, which is a really acclaimed episode.
Yeah,
and I think it was a very good episode,
that's a
to be
good
fair.
episode. That's one of the better new ones.
That was the first, if I'm not mistaken, because that's like the 8th episode of like the season 6, so you go through some crap at the start there of like the boil, and then the rebirth episode when they first come back is kind of shit.
Yeah.
But then when you get to that episode, that's when I was like, oh my god, like this is getting actually really strong now.
that episode is... It gets him back on track.
It seems that way. But and also that one we saw recently where he was like a fashion mogul. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was a good one.
And like just like he's like such a funny, brilliant character.
Yeah, this episode obviously has him with the Atomic Superman.
Yeah,
you know,
those are cool as. Like there's a great underutilized
Doomsday weapon
series of characters in Futurama. Just makes you wonder, like, wow, the Fantastic Four and some of their, maybe 3 of their friends, you know, like Black Panther or Luke Cage, or who's another Fantastic Four ally, like Nova or something, as Nova is in the Galactus Herald, Nova, but maybe she's a bit too similar to Johnny Storm. But again, it's like maybe 8 of the X-Men, you know what I mean? 7 of the X-Men, excuse me.
You know, the other great contribution of this episode, correct me if I'm wrong, but it does bring in the Globetrotters for the first time, right?
Yep.
And they're like classic Futurama characters at this point.
Yeah, they're tremendously
It's such
likable,
a genius mix the like Hanna-Barbera Globetrotter like cartoon characters, but also have them as like, you know, theoretical physicists or like peers of Farnsworth. Yeah. It's such a funny touch. Yeah, they're always classic characters whenever they come on the show.
Yeah, they appeared in Bender's Big Score, for instance, as the professor was like trying to research to rip in the universe.
Yeah.
Sorry, was that Bender's Big Score?
Yeah, I think that's in Bender's.
No, that's in Beast of Billion Backs.
No, you're right, it is, so yeah. I guess that's their next big comeback episode.
Yeah. I thought they were in Bender's Big Score, but maybe those two came out in months of each other, so maybe...
Yeah, probably just mixing them up, but possibly, they do appear here and there throughout the rest of the show.
I remember in Less Than Hero, he's a witness to when they steal that diamond so they can take it to the zookeeper and rescue Leela's parents.
Right, yeah.
Bubblegum Tate's in the lobby there.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, classic characters, especially when we were watching it again recently, and they realize who it is during the basketball game, or like Professor Farnsworth realizes he's the same like lecturer, and they like wipe the whiteboard from the basketball play, and then immediately like all the diagrams of where the players are going, he puts into like the chemistry of elements or whatever. Oh, yeah, I like that because I remember one time I was just high watching a basketball game, and it reminded me of like, you know, when you see like simulation animations of like chemical like reactions and stuff like that. So I kind of dig that Futurama writers got that as nerds or whatever as well.
Yeah, definitely one of the more potently science fiction of the entire 4-season run. One of the most enjoyable, likable, impressive episodes. As far as I know, it was the kind of episode which tended to be near the top of a lot of people's lists.
Yeah, I can understand why.
If it's not, then it really, really, really ought to be. Even with, you know, I know there's been a couple of other seasons of this show out, and I don't know how much people want to prioritize the newer stuff. I mean, some people gravitate towards some of it. It's more pandering to, I don't know, people who watch shows in general, what they like about stupid shows and character development for its own sake. So, you know, I gravitate towards some of the newer episodes. But even if they did, I think by those standards, this would, A Time Keeps on Slippin' would impress them immensely so.
Yeah, well, for better or worse, this show might have invented like 2010's adult animation.
That and like kind of like that sort of pretentious sort of King of the Hill, like sort of like it's real drama, sort of just like just self-appreciating sort of tosh, you know.
A little bit. That show feels a little bit more antiquated though, rather than say this episode. It can be like
yeah.
Something about that show, like in a way, but Family Guy, American Dad. So King of the Hill's too like, for better or worse, once again, like conservative coded to be that relevant to like 2010's adult animated sitcom.
Oh, that's kind of true. Yeah, I mean,
like at the heart of that show, it's like
I don't know if it's that conservative at heart, to be honest.
No, like sort of coded in even the sort of moral lessons of it, even when it's not doing the satire of the stiffness of the conservative Hank Hill or whatever. It's still moralistically, and it's like, you know, the conclusion to its fables is very much like that. It it reminds me of like a show made for like people who like at the time as well probably still like The Simpsons or like a, you know, Cartoon Network sitcoms or whatever, but they needed a show that like told them to grow up. It's like Bluey, but for like people in the age bracket of say like 26 to 34. You know, that's sort of how I feel about King of the Hill.
Interesting way of thinking about it. Yeah.
That's sort of what I mean by conservative coding. Like it's sort of trying to instill that sort of like settle down to the status quo sort of mentality. You know, when it's not trying to be satirical, but even then, it's satire is never that pointed. Say in a way that like The Simpsons or Futurama will be a bit more pointed.
Yeah.
You know, it's typically like fair and balanced. You know. It's like the centrist programming.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and then Futurama, with Time Keeps on Slippin', few shows in the 20-minute bracket, or of any time limit, have released something as interesting, as compelling, as entertaining as Time Keeps on Slippin'. Don't know what else to say, because if I can just keep going on about how strong it is and just how it makes the most of such a very intrinsically smart and impressive and enviable premise. It's a masterpiece of the show. It may be this and Parasite's Lost are in my opinion the two best episodes of the show up to this point.
Yeah.
And maybe my other favourites like Anthology of Interest 1 of the ones we've discussed so far, and Hell is Other Robots.
Yeah, those easily two of the best so far.
Poplars.
Yeah, see, there's a few as well, but there's just a lot of really good episodes of this show. But those are two standouts in as far as maybe like you could say television drama mixed with like a sitcom humor. You know, there's a sort of bit more depth to it than a standard Futurama episode, but it's not in a sort of peculiar or like, you know, incongruent way. It's like in a very congruent way to how the show works. Like the show leaves enough tone space to allow for this sort of interesting sci-fi drama to take precedence in a few episodes. And that is what's good about this show, is it doesn't just do one thing every episode. Like, it's very like the episodic format really does help it in that sense, you know. It's just got so much tone variation, like way more, like you've probably brought up, than say The Simpsons, for example. Just because of its setting, you know. It's sort of and once again set the precedent for those more fantastical adult sitcoms, you know. Well, obviously Annie Theory, but like, you know, it's more fantastical, this included, you know, as in more fantastical than The Simpsons or Family Guy, you know, a bit more of a standard, or even like, I don't know, the other adult sitcoms of those times, things like you've mentioned Mission Hill. So I guess there was, like, Duckman was in an absurdist sort of, like
South Park was very out there as well, obviously.
South Park had like a lo-fi cardboard, you know, cut and paste humour to it as well, Whereas, I guess coming out of like a major sort of cable network, this was unique at the time.
Yes, it would have been. Yeah, I wish Futurama embarked on more of the heady sci-fi concept episodes, but I guess you have to sort of come up with those, and they're not the easiest thing to do. And when you think about its track record, like, it was better than like the show which existed prior to Futurama to explore this. Of course, was the UK's Red Dwarf, and Red Dwarf, which did have obviously British sitcoms much shorter per season. So you had 6 seasons of Red Dwarf with maybe 6 episodes each. Of really good stuff, and you know that. You have maybe 2 major classics that sort of abide by that per season, and then maybe a couple other ones that are really strong, that are more of a basic sitcom premise, and then 2 which are just sort of flipping. You're like, guys, really? Like, you had 6 episodes and you went with like 2 like these. You had more each, really.
2 are just slapstick or something.
Yeah, like in the first season, you had Confidence and Paranoia. When the 4th season had a couple episodes which were a bit like sort of like that Meltdown episode with all the, like, you remember that episode with all the historical figures on the planet? Like, it's a decent episode, but it's pretty silly as far as the stuff goes. The execution is sloppy even by its own standards. Like, you know, as far as effects and monsters and stuff goes. But the Winnie the Pooh gag is amazing in that episode. That's someone no one should ever have to see. But yeah, I'd love to do a Red Dwarf retrospective on this channel, but I'm done with the Futurama one. We'd love to watch those 6 seasons again. They're mesmerising. It would kind of fit in with the
27 seasons?
No. What?
How many Red Dwarf seasons are there?
Like 12 now, maybe.
Okay.
And some of them are just like 3 episodes, you know, like some of them weren't that long. But like, and then with the couple came out in the mid-2010s that were like 6 episodes each. And then eventually, I think it concluded with like some film, like some telefilm. Really? Yeah. You know, it is what it is.
They just kept making Red Dwarf.
Oh, well, they're not really, because you know how it went, right?
Well, like, after Robot Wars, they stopped making it. But I mean, when they...
Well, the initial run finished in like 1999 with like 8 seasons, and there was that 9th season thing in like the late 2000s, and there was one in 2012 season, and then there was 2 other seasons in the mid-2010s, and then I think the film was after that. Yeah. Maybe there was a season I didn't watch. I definitely watched the 2 in the mid-2010s. Yeah. But no, and especially Red Dwarf, like having it sort of like the Futurama comedy values, if sort of the Doctor Who sort of production values, you know, absolutely. Yeah. It's marvellous, you know. There's something so precious about that whole thing.
Well, even less production values for the most part, because it's a comedy show. You know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, it's a Doctor Who, especially in the 60s. And that was a black and white, so it could disguise it a bit. Yeah. Sometimes things are getting pretty dire.
Oh, well, they weren't putting any money in television budgets back then, I'm sure.
No. And even, it must be said, like...
Whereas, like, the corny effects in Red Dwarf helped the comedy, right?
Yeah, that's very true. So some of even in the 70s, like, by the sort of Williams era of Doctor Who, like some of that was pretty shocking. It was endearing to a point, but I mean, the show looked really good sometimes in the 70s, and then there was a bit of a drop after season 14. Yeah. Unfortunately, but
I'm sure they just stopped spending money on it.
You know, there was complaints, and there was after Mary Whitehouse's complaints led to a lot of changes. Like sort of certain people who are, like Philip Hinchcliffe, producer, was sort of influential with getting resources for the show and making it a really good show. He had to be kicked. And so, they're just like, all right. And once they had the excuse to sort of funnel money somewhere else, they did, you know.
It's always Al Gore's wife's fault.
Yeah, the equivalent. The equivalent, yeah. She's quite an unpleasant character, actually. Like, some people tried to characterize her as like a well-meaning sort of, you know, the public didn't want this sort of stuff. She's trying to protect the children. But really, well, she would publish quite nasty things and slanderous things about like Dennis Potter's mother, which wasn't true, because Dennis Potter had one of his dramas. There was kind of a middle-aged woman who was a prostitute who had a child, and so I don't know why Mary Whitehouse started saying in a column or some press statement that this is not at all what happened to Dennis Potter in Dennis Potter's childhood, but she said that. Yeah. And then with this, you know, the ironic thing is, Dennis Potter himself actually said, oh, you know, like, before this all happened, like, they asked him in the late 70s what he thinks of her, and he said, oh, look, like, I don't believe in censorship, but, like, I understand where she's coming from. Like, I understand if some members of the public don't appreciate this stuff. You know, he probably understands that his stuff airs at, like, a later time slot, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more graphic, so... But then, obviously, I'm sure he didn't feel that way whatsoever once she'd slandered him like that, like, which is a really kind of horrible thing to do.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that anecdote because, I think sometimes, because, you know, given the popularity of conservatism right now, which is kind of baffling and makes you want to put a bullet in your brain, but, like, no, because you got to fight it, point the bullet somewhere else. No, seriously, so sometimes people defend Whitehouse a little bit more now, seemingly, not Doctor Who fans, but, and so you just got to share that, like, she was not like a wholesome
censorship
character.
Again. There's a massive wave of censorship.
Well, it's interesting because that's why everyone was against the SJWs initially, but then they hated the SJWs so much they fell ass backwards into being right wing, and now there's the right wing censors who they opposed before the SJW sort of existed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The guys who were trying to censor Grand Theft Auto back when, you know,
yeah.
Those were the first enemy, and then now the left censoring video games, so we got to stop them. But then they became right wing, like the people who opposed the SJWs, they became right wing, and then they're like, oh no, censorship's good if it's on the right. Actually, and they probably even think they've probably gone full circle and like, oh, we should have censored Grand Theft Auto back in the day, actually.
Yeah.
Which is just, I mean, like
that'd be a funny.
Like my whole thing on Grand Theft Auto is just like who's the parent getting their kids Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like why? I look, like, I was a kid. My parents never would have gotten me those games.
Nah.
Like, I don't know what parents did you have? Like, my parents, like, I'm so shocked at the kids, like, put it like this, like, I'm shocked at the amount of kids who's playing World of Warcraft. You know what my parents said when I, like, asked them, like, knowing they'd probably say no, hey, can I get this game where you have to pay a monthly thing for it? They'd be like, what, no, we're not doing that. Like, what the... what kind of reckless parents did you all have? Like...
It was...
I wasn't even repressed, but they weren't paying fucking monthly fee for a fucking game.
The kids who played World of Warcraft either had like computer nerd parents who, you know, had an account anyway.
Right.
Or like just negligent parents.
Yeah.
Who would just be like, yeah, it'll shut them up. I'll go to that.
No, because like I remember I remember I had like relatively fruitful, like, you know, relatively well off, like upper middle class, but like. Yeah, that was good. So they're just like, wait, what? Pay a monthly fee for a game? They're just like, no, and rightfully so. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just one of those things where it's just like, huh? Like, did your parents just not give a shit? Like, I guess not. Like,
yeah. And for a shit game too.
Yeah, I'm really glad in hindsight that, you know, I mean, I played a bit of Dragon Fable, but that was free, you know, and I got over it. Like, if I had to pay for Dragon Fable, you know, I got over it quick enough that it wouldn't have been worth it.
Yeah.
In any case, we're talking about some silly shit now, but Time Keeps on Slipping is not that silly, and if it is, it's to its strengths.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks everyone. See you next time if you're so inclined.